and Guidry goes, let's go look at something that took place 40 years ago. Who cares? Okay, that's political.
Welcome, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world or whenever it is that you're watching us. Welcome to the Lawyer's Den. On behalf of International TV, IBM TV, my name is William Trezevant, and I'm your host this evening for our very, very new season. And I'm very excited to welcome back all of our colleagues, the names, the people, the familiar faces that we so enjoy. And so with that, I want to begin by saying this season is going to be an interesting season, only because we have some really, really interesting and controversial topics coming up. And we are not one to shy away from those issues that are facing all of us. Our everyday discussions around the coffee tables, in our cafes, in our living rooms, around our kitchen tables. So with that, I want to first introduce my erstwhile colleague, companion, and some would say mentor, better half, and generally everything that is good about this world. And that is my good friend who hails and comes to us this evening, fully educated with a JD, an MBA, an LLM, which is significantly higher than most lawyers have achieved, as well as the unique distinction of having been a two-time state champion in chess for the entire state of Florida. With that, where in the world is my good friend Nick? Nick, are you out there?
Barely out here, Mr. Bill. Good to see you again for our fourth edition of the Lawyer's Den. And you're right, we have some really exciting topics we're going to look at today. And one of them is going to be here this evening, as a matter of fact. It's going to, or morning, depending what city you're in. So do you want to bring in our panelist?
By all means, Nick, let's bring them in one by one. However you want to shoot.
I am going to bring them one by one as they sit out there. And this lady, who's really great, hails from the great state, actually the country of Lithuania, then went to the University of Denver, where she received her law degree, also received a master's in law from the University of Denver. And let's bring in Guidry Stantonite, who is the class of our show. And I don't know why she's showing blank. She's not showing blank here.
Okay, well,
so who knows why.
Let's go back, and who else do we have?
Okay, we also have this gentleman, and he's actually from the, I went to Fordham University and then the State University of New York at Albany, where he received his, Buffalo, where he received his law degree. I'm sorry, I saw the Buffalo thing behind you. And now I believe he's moving on his future at the district attorney's office at the city of New York in Brooklyn. Let's bring in our street fighter, Fernando Leal.
Hey, Nick. Hey, everybody. Nice to be back.
Yes.
All right.
Buenos dias, baby. Okay. So now the thing is, now that we have a good group, we could probably just end it right here. And we have some more. Okay. Some of our titled people besides Fernando. This person is actually a professor at Georgia College, and he's also been a professor at law school. He received his JD at The Ohio State University, a master's degree from the University of Alabama, which has a good football team, and also a master's in law from New York University. Let's bring in our own professor, Adam Lamparero. Adam, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Yes, we have to have our resident professor to keep us in line. And now, this gentleman hails from the great state of Utah, where he received his JD from BYU and his LM from George Washington. He is now the Assistant Attorney General for Constitutional Law Defense for the state of Utah. Notice these people all moved up except me and you, Bill. Let's bring in Jeff Teichert. Jeff, welcome back to the show. So below us, Bill, we have three titled people, and then there's you and me. So we'll have to think about that for a while. And anyway, we got to push it over to you, Bill, our Den Master. Let's give a warm welcome to Den Master Bill Trezevant, who's the host of the show. And Bill, you have to tell us, what is our topic for today? What are we going to be discussing?
Well, for some reason, the nation keeps returning to this subject, and it's a subject that seemingly shall not perish from this earth. so to speak. And for it, I just want to begin with essentially this. That is to say that it's it's a controversial one. It's one that is on the docket for the upcoming Supreme Court, and it is Roe versus Wade once again. During the interim, just to bring everybody up to speed very, very quickly, because my job really is to manage the intellect that is contained around me, there have been two significant developments concerning Roe v. Wade, and it's squarely in front of the court. But for our audience, I want to hand it over to our newly minted constitutional scholar for our briefing for tonight's show. So, Jeff, Texas has aimed its gun squarely at Roe v. Wade. What can you tell us? What is going on? What are they doing in Mississippi? And what are we going to know? And what are we going to be talking about tonight? Jeff, please. Up, Jeff.
Microphone.
Yes. No. Okay, well, okay, Jeff. All right.
He'll be right back.
Now
we have an injury. We need a substitute. Do we have a substitute teacher?
Yes,
Wait a minute. We do.
we
Adam
do.
Lamparero.
Adam, you have
substituting in.
the floor, Adam. Please give us our briefing. Texas, Mississippi, Supreme Court. Listen, everything's lined up. And shall I say, this is the Alamo, Adam? The winners are leading. What do you have?
Texas and Mississippi are trying to get the Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade so that they can outlaw all abortions. This stems from the fact that the Supreme Court's decision in Roe versus Wade was based on no reasonable interpretation of the Constitution. Texas is itself legitimate. But what I will predict is that Roe isn't going anywhere and abortion is here to stay.
Okay. Well, there we have it. For our audience tonight, Roe v. Wade, Texas and Mississippi. In fact, I think in Mississippi, they want to outlaw any abortion. And Adam, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't it after like 6 weeks?
In Mississippi, they want to outlaw abortions after 15 weeks, and in Texas, they want to outlaw them after 6 weeks. Both arguably violate the court's decision in Roe and Planned Parenthood of Southeastern Pennsylvania versus Casey. However, these efforts have continued for decades after Roe because Roe was an illegitimate decision, not based on
No, this is not
rights out of thin air.
I'm going for briefing right now because, Adam, I want to bring everybody else up to speed. Now, isn't it also true that my understanding is that there was a doctor who intentionally turned himself in under the new Texas law so that he could actually challenge the law in court? Is that right, Adam?
That's correct.
Okay, and one of the vagaries of this law in Texas is, in fact, that anybody can prosecute almost for profit. If I turn you in and I'm a private citizen, I can get you prosecuted and I get like $10,000. Isn't that also true with the Texas law, Adam?
That's correct, but can I make one additional brief point?
No. If it's an argument right now, I just want to get the facts together. Is that a fact?
Well, the facts are that the real issue is going to be the Mississippi case with Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health. That's where the court on December 1st will hear oral arguments about whether Roe should be overturned and whether Mississippi's law, which bans abortions after 15 weeks, is valid.
Okay. All right. Guidry, if you are available. How are you, young lady? Good to see you again. And here we go.
I'm great. I'm in the airport, so I apologize for any troubles if I bring. But I try to.
Oh no, you're not. And actually, bring the trouble. Good trouble, Guidry. You just keep bringing it on. Mississippi, Roe v. Wade, once again. Guidry.
Well, there is a bigger picture. I think the Supreme Court is losing its standing in the eyes of United States citizens. I think that when we are talking about abortions, we cannot separate the reproductive right from the woman's more basic right, the very essential right. We have to acknowledge the history of the United States that has been undermining that right. And I don't want to take us very, very far away. I want to take us to 2020, Georgia Detention Center, where thanks to a whistleblower, we found out that ICE officials were performing certain gynecologic procedures and semi-forced sterilization to women. So we are not talking about the Middle Ages. We are talking about constant and incredibly raw political issue that has been blown out of the proportion, and it should not be happening. And it would not be happening if we did not have such a conservative Supreme Court. And even now, in the eyes of the United States, the Supreme Court is losing its standing, popularity. So the issue is there to stay.
Wow, Fernando, what are your thoughts on this issue? Because I mean, coming from New York, I mean, people must be up in arms up in New York. I mean, most people think around the country, at least around the world, that New York is so liberal that they cannot be helped. Second only to those liberals in San Francisco. What's going on, Fernando?
Well, they're right about that. There are a bunch of slap-happy liberals in New York. But in this case, those slap-happy liberals are correct. And I do agree with everything Guidry is saying. And the issue here is going to be that the Mississippi law is a little bit more traditional in that the enforcement of the laws with the state. In Texas, the Christian Taliban got a little bit more wily and enforcement with the citizens. Get away from the state, which is why you end up getting the decision to not provide injunctive relief. The court just sidestepped the issue and said they don't think anybody has standing, so we're not going to deal with it right now. We'll let it go. I agree with Dent in that issued decision, which isn't really a decision. I think that's why they're going to focus on the Mississippi law, because it's a little bit more traditional in scope and the way it's going to be enforced, and that it's with the state as opposed to shifting enforcement to the general population. And any Yahoo can go out and just say, hey, Guidry went to have an abortion on the 7th week. Where's my 10 grand?
Okay, see, Fernando, and I think Fernando raises a salient point. And Nick, I'm coming to you, and Jeff, I'm going to come to you to clean everything up as our constitutional man. But Nick, as my man on the street, essentially what Fernando's describing is essentially, isn't this like the Salem witch hunts that these slap-happy, what'd you call them, Fernando? What slap-happy Christians? What was that term?
Well, it's the Christian Taliban versus the slap-happy liberals.
That's a really nice thing to say, Fernando.
Okay. Time out.
Right.
Okay. First of all, Fernando is way off base here, and I'm going to tell him why. Because first of all, you got to read the opinion that Harry Blackmun wrote, the majority opinion back in 1973, which you can find in 450 U.S. 113, 1973 Supreme Court case. And in that case, if you look at real carefully, what they did is they were trying to determine when life actually existed. And the consensus of, which is even today, that life begins at conception. And I'll go over the study on that. What they did is they actually pulled the AMA decision and said, well, it actually exists at the time that they can actually be viable. And that was the Supreme Court in 1973. Now, fast forward to 2018. For those of you who want to get educated and actually read the science, you need to go to Social Science Research Network, which no lawyers do because they don't know about researching scientific papers. But if you do so, you'll come across a paper, Biologist Consensus on When Life Begins. Oh, there's the paper.
Can I please interject here?
No, Nick. I think Adam just, Adam, you could have waited 30 seconds, but Adam threw down a challenge. Adam, what do you have to say? What do you got? Adam throws down a challenge.
I want the audience to be very clear. Roe versus Wade is one of the most illegitimate decisions in the 20th century. And the reason is because the Supreme Court created the right to abortion out of thin air. There's not a single word in the Constitution that could possibly be interpreted to support a right to abortion. The Supreme Court's decision was illegitimate, and you had 9 unelected judges that decided to make policy based on their subjective policy predilections without even considering what the Constitution said. That's wrong. That's anti-democratic. And I think that Nick needs to go back and read the decision, because when he talks about following the science, I think about Anthony Fauci. And if you were in his camp, then we're all in a lot of trouble.
Okay, well, now I'm going to educate Adam a little bit because
then I got to get to Jeff. But go ahead, Nick. What do you got?
Okay. Well, let me tell you about this study that came from Social Science Research Network.
Studies should be decided by legislatures and democratic process.
First of all,
we'll get to Jeff.
First of all, here's what they thought about. They did. First of all, who should be making the decision of when life begins? 81% of the people that were interviewed said it should be biologists. Only 2% said the Supreme Court of the United States. So for that part, he's right. The Supreme Court should not be making the decision. They're not biologists. They're a bunch of talking heads like Adam, and they have no scientific background whatsoever. Number two, when they actually did do their research on this, even pro-lifers, 60% of them, and they interviewed 5,000 biologists that held PhD degrees, 60% said life begins at fertilization. 90% if you're actually pro-life, 60% if you're actually pro-choice. It is overwhelming evidence that, of course, attorneys ignore because they failed biology. They didn't go to med school. They went to law school, and they're talking heads.
Okay. Now, Jeff, I need your mic, please. But Jeff, you are my strict constructionalist for the Constitution. And I don't know if 15 weeks is in the Constitution, 6 weeks are in the Constitution. I don't know if biology is in the Constitution. I do know the right to privacy is in the Constitution. And if I recall correctly, and I'm a little fuzzy, Jeff, that's why the state of Utah has placed their trust in you, and I now place my trust in you too. Where in the Constitution does it guarantee that an individual will have control over their own body? In this case, women. Jeff, I need your microphone, please, Jeff. Okay.
It looks like Jeff has been silenced.
Okay,
The
Guidry.
silent majority.
Okay, Guidry. And then I'm coming to you, Fernando. Guidry, this is my rough understanding, and that is simply this: that the history of Roe goes back to the right to privacy. In a series of Supreme Court decisions. Those decisions go all the way back to, say, 1910. And Nick, some shows ago, was arguing for the reason against that 100-year-old case. But from there, it all the way came forward. And we now have the right to privacy, which Roe was firmly grounded in. And now the court's trying to change it. Guidry, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, it's crazy, isn't it, or no?
Well, it is crazy. I think the fact that we are standing here and talking about whether a woman has a right to abortion, it is crazy. 21st century with such a ability to access so much information and really be able to analyze the situation. And now it seems like we are going back to the Middle Ages when we are taking this right from a woman. When it comes to right to privacy, no, Constitution does not have that right of privacy. Right to privacy was found by the Supreme Court justices from the 14th Amendment. Right to life, liberty, property, pursuit of happiness. It doesn't matter right now. I know that Justice Thomas always would mention the Roe v. Wade, and how illegitimate it is and what a big mistake it was. At this point, I think we can have debate of how we arrived to it, how the Supreme Court justices arrived to this idea 50 years ago. But at this point, we have a precedent. We have a stare decisis that indicates this following of this reasoning by the Supreme Court justices. So right now, to really completely negate this kind of thinking would be absolutely bizarre, in my opinion. And I think there is probably an Adam who prescribes to this opinion that maybe it would be more simple if this right to abortion would be given to every state to regulate it. But in my opinion, it would be very dangerous, because even now, if we look at what happened in Texas recently, just now, with this SB 8 law, it prohibited abortion in the whole state, meaning that 29 million of people in the state of Texas, women, cannot have any right, majority of them cannot have any right to abortion, because let's agree biologically, to determine that a woman is pregnant less than 6 weeks is very, very difficult. So here we are talking about women losing the right to have the abortion, to their privacy, and to family planning. Whereas in all other states in the United States, women have access to this. And just to finish it, when we're talking about women, or the group of people who were the most prejudiced, the most harmed in this particular case, we are talking about young women, we're talking about poor women, we are talking about women of color, we are talking about immigrants. And we're talking about period of at least 1 year. We're talking about foreseeable future, because for this law to be challenged and to be given to the Supreme Court, it has to go to the Texas District Court, Texas Circuit Court, Texas Supreme Court, and then to the Supreme Court, because there is no federal jurisdiction here. So I think that the suffering was huge, and I'm very disappointed with the Supreme Court justice making this decision, not to join it.
Okay, Jeff, are you with us right now?
I certainly hope so. Can you hear me now?
Jeff, I've got, first, it's great to see you, and I love the smile.
Thank you.
And you are really going to have to kind of clean things up here, and that is to say that constitutionally, where does it come from? Why are they attacking it? And then I have a follow-up question when you're done with the first question. But go ahead, Jeff, please. Make sense of this.
Well, first of all, I believe I should refrain from discussing the Texas or Missouri cases, because the state of Utah could be filing amicus briefs. I can go back, though, and say I think Guidry is correct that the rationale, and Roe has been a result in search of a rationale for years. I think the rationale is substantive due process. And what that essentially means is the Supreme Court has found in a number of cases that there are certain liberties that are so fundamental that even if they're not directly enumerated in the Constitution, they fall under the right to liberty, and you can't abrogate those without a rational basis for doing so. And I believe that is the rationale for Roe. Would it be overturned? It's anybody's guess. The way I count the votes, Thomas and Alito would probably favor overturning it. Breyer, Kagan, and Sotomayor would be decidedly against that. I don't think we know about Chief Justice Roberts, Justice Kavanaugh, Justice Gorsuch, or Justice Barrett. Now, those are all Republican-appointed justices, and you might read the tea leaves to suggest that you're more likely to get 3 out of those 4 votes to overturn, but we've been really surprised before. My prediction, and I have no basis for this except watching the Supreme Court, is that Roe dies the death of 1,000 cuts rather than being directly overturned, that it gets limited and distinguished and so on over the years. And that's kind of how it died.
Okay, fine, Jeff. Now, here's my question, and I don't want the audience to think that I'm being unfair to Jeff. But Jeff, listen, as Guidry raised the point, that listen, this disproportionately affects people that are less advantaged economically, people of women of color, of less education, and in many respects, immigrants. And Nick, I'm coming to you just after I follow this up, because it's going to be the same question for you, Nick. Jeff, fairly or unfairly, why are white guys always trying to beat up on poor colored women? I mean,
that is a terrible statement. That is racist, and that's wrong.
I go. But Jeff, please, I'm going to go Jeff, Nick, and then I'm coming to you, Adam. But why, Jeff? Why is it after, all these years, after Roe v. Wade, and constantly, every time we turn around, white guys are going after women? Jeff?
Well, I think for the benefit of our audience, that is what we might look at as an as-applied challenge. It's not necessarily saying that a statute or a law that limits abortion in some way is unconstitutional on its face, but that as it's applied, it disadvantages certain groups. I guess, ultimately, I look back to the fact that abortion is important to many people, to many groups. The idea, however, is that the Constitution really says nothing about it. Now, the fact that a case may have been wrongly decided does not necessarily decide the question. We have a principle called stare decisis, which means in Latin, let the decision stand. And so Roe has been upheld a number of times. It has a number of precedents behind it. And the theory behind stare decisis, one of them anyway, is that it's better to have an issue settled than to have it settled right. Not sure I totally buy that, but that's what the cases say. There are other a couple of other considerations. The courts will look at, have public expectations grown up around this particular decision? Is it going to be really disruptive to get rid of it? And another one, has the precedent proven unworkable? And you can see that on those 2 points, each side is arguing their own side of it.
Okay.
Liberals are saying that precedent or that expectations have grown up around it. Conservatives are saying it's proven to be an unworkable precedent.
Okay, Nick, real quick.
Yeah, let me.
No, because then I'm coming to Adam, and Fernando, you're going to be on deck after Adam. But Nick, white guys are constantly assaulting women of color. What is
Okay,
it?
let me carpet bomb you on that one, Bill. Okay, first of all, let's get real here. If you really, so if abortion, scientifically, you're killing kids. If you don't like that, then you could get a vasectomy. Or if Guidry doesn't like it, she can get a hysterectomy. And then this issue's off the table. But do you know, in all the briefs I've read, no one even shows that as a sample way out. So if you really don't like kids and you want to kill them, then just get a vasectomy, get a hysterectomy, and it's over. Now, why you don't take personal responsibility, I don't know. Why that's not mentioned in any briefs, I don't know. Now, in terms of Adam's thing, well, it shouldn't be decided. Does he ever read the Declaration of Independence? The right to life, liberty, well, life. Ooh, that's a big one. And that's what we're fighting over here. We're fighting over the right to life. And I hear all this liberal rhetoric. My choice. Well, here's your choice. Go to a hysterectomy and then leave me alone. And leave those unborn children alone. And that's really what you should be doing.
Okay.
In terms of Fernando, I have no clue what he's talking about.
Okay, well, hang on. Adam and then Fernando. Adam, you were shaking your head. I saved you on a challenge. You got the floor now, buddy. What, Adam?
Well, first, I condemn racism and all racist comments, and any comments directed at white people as a group, I condemn. Number 2, we live in a democracy. That gives the average person liberty, and part of that liberty means you have the power to decide the laws under which you're governed through the democratic process in your state legislature. Third, that liberty and democracy itself is compromised when you give 9 unelected judges the power to invent rights out of thin air that have no basis in the Constitution, upon which the Constitution is silent, and upon which no reasonable interpretation could support. That's anti-democratic, and I want to give power to the people to decide whether abortion should be allowed in Connecticut or California or Wisconsin or Washington, not 9 elected unaccountable judges. And what Guidry is essentially arguing is that 9 people should have the right to do whatever they want for the entire country in totally disregarding democracy. And she admitted that the justices literally invented the right out of thin air because they found it in the Constitution. Guidry does not favor democracy. Guidry does not favor liberty. Guidry does not favor freedom. I favor democracy, and I believe in the people. I don't believe in philosopher kings. I'm surprised Guidry would adopt such an authoritarian and dictatorial approach.
Okay, Fernando and Guidry, go. I know, Guidry, we're gonna get to you, but Fernando, usually you're in cahoots with Adam, but you for freedom or not? I mean, I don't know.
Listen, I can't be in cahoots with complete and utter nonsense from a professor in some unknown college in Georgia.
No way, Fernando.
I'm going to have to come to the defense of my friend Bill. Bill is 100% correct when he says that this targets poor people, minorities, women of color. I do not understand why men have to stick their noses up a girl's vagina and figure out what they should not do with their body and the child that they want to or do not want to keep. Period. It is a right. It's already been established, a right. Making these arguments now that it was decided wrong and all this other garbage isn't going to undo it. Move past it. Guidry is right. Bill is right. The fact that this power now should be taken away from the states, there should be some sort of federal statute that levels the playing field and creates a floor. Next, Nick citing to a social science article. That is not hard science. It's mumbo jumbo nonsense like a political science degree, whatever other nonsense, sociology and the likes. You talk about attorneys, they fail science, this, that, and the other. You know where you find medical research? In a database called Medline. I went to Medline because I've handled med mal cases, so I have a subscription. I did not find your nonsense social science article that isn't peer reviewed. So really, in all honesty, your article is nothing more than toilet paper for you to use later on.
Bill, can I throw a flag here?
It is.
Okay, that's
It
the
is.
second to last flag, Adam. Do you sure you want
It
to use
is
it?
nonsense.
I have to address this outburst.
Okay,
Really.
all right, Adam, and then Gage, we're coming to you. Adam.
You may agree with Fernando that women should have a right to terminate a pregnancy, and you may agree with Guidry. But those are issues to be decided by the legislature. Those are issues should be decided by the people through the democratic process. They shouldn't be decided by 9 unelected judges when the Constitution gives them no power to do it, and when they manipulate and disregard the Constitution to implement their own policy preferences. That's anti-democratic, and I'm shocked that Fernando and Guidry would say that democracy can be a second-class citizen, and we can let the courts decide what they want to do when they want to do it. It's kind of like what Guidry's saying. It's kind of like saying, I know that I've abused my spouse for 20 years, but now that I don't do it anymore, then you should stay with me. Because she admitted Roe was an abomination. Fernando acknowledged that Roe was wrongly decided. But yet they want to keep it now because they think, well, it's going to help women. That should be decided by the legislature and democracy and the people, not philosopher kings.
Okay.
I'm going to throw one of my preemptory challenges.
I'm sorry, Fernando, and then Gidry, I promise I'm coming to you. Fernando, what do you got? Real quick.
Okay, number one, it's directed at Adam. Number one,
I'm not
it's
surprised.
wrongly decided.
Okay.
It's only wrongly decided because you say so. And I
No,
can't
because the
support of some guy
Constitution
teaching
says
in an
so, that's
unknown
why.
college
I
in
believe in
Georgia.
the
That's
Constitution.
number one. Number
Okay.
two, we live in a republic, not a democracy. We have democratic principles. And the purpose of the court is to step in and decide when the other branches do not, and it is their providence to interpret laws and interpret the Constitution and
They're
come
making
out with
up laws, they're
decisions.
not interpreting
That's
any
what
of them.
lawyers do. And if you actually practiced instead of sitting in a classroom, you would know that.
Okay. Time out. Gidry, you have the floor, but Gidry, I have to kind of, present you on this one. And that is, you hail from a nation that had some real authoritarian kinds of tendencies in the past, and that you left that country and you came here ostensibly for freedom. Now, Adam is saying that somehow you're anti-democratic, anti-freedom, anti-choice. Essentially, you're against everything and don't know how to act properly here in the United States. And so I'm really confused, Gidry. Is what Adam is saying true? Because I can't see you like that. I mean, please say it ain't so, Gidry. Say it ain't so. What do you got?
Bill, I'm also very confused, but having to come in from Adam, nothing new. I think it's been repeating itself, that kind of description of my views. First of all, I did not say that Roe v. Wade was decided incorrectly. I said that privacy is nowhere mentioned in the Constitution. Adam, it doesn't matter if Roe v. Wade would have been decided using 14th Amendment equal protection clause. The result was needed result. I support the result. And when you think about the time when the Constitution was drafted, 18th century, at that point, men did not know that much about abortion. If you read the historic sources, women actually handled it in privacy. And so at that time when the Constitution was drafted, abortion was really nowhere in the forefront. And if we want to keep Constitution as a main law of the land, we really have to adopt it to our
Let's throw a flag.
society and
All
different
right.
norms
Okay.
and the
Jeff, I was
interests.
coming to you, but Jeff threw a flag. Jeff, you come right in here as our strict instructionalist. What do you got, buddy?
Well, first of all, Guidry's history is wrong. William Blackstone, in his famous commentaries on the law of England, directly talked about abortion being outlawed and, in fact, being considered like manslaughter or something. So number one, they may not have had the same scientific knowledge then that they have today, but they did have policy preferences regarding abortion. And I guess the second thing, I remember hearing Justice Kagan say once, why doesn't Justice Scalia just declare victory? Because in her mind, everybody on the Supreme Court is an originalist, and there are conservative originalists and liberal originalists, but now they all believe they have to justify their decisions based on original intent. Interesting point of view. Justice Scalia's originalist view on Roe was it's an important right to many people, but the Constitution says nothing about it. And so what do you do when the Constitution says nothing about it? And then his answer to that is, we vote. And I think
Exactly.
there is a danger in constitutionalizing issues that are not even really indirectly mentioned in the Constitution, other than sort of an unlimited freewheeling liberty analysis.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, Adam, hang on, because you're
Thank you, Jeff.
you're on the flags right now. Nick, I'm coming to you, but Nick, I want to do a couple quick things. First, I just want to make sure that you're keeping an eye on the comment section one too, because it looks a little lively in there.
Oh, wow. It's crazy.
I know, but Nick, here's my fundamental thing. I mean, Adam and Jeff are talking about, their originalist views as a theory of interpreting the Constitution. Now, Guidry raises a very interesting point. It's one that I happen to agree with, because we believe in a living Constitution. That is one that changes and reflects the values of society as we move forward. And so, Nick, to some degree, just to sharpen this a bit, are we really debating whether or not the law should be practical and reflect today's values, rather than hanging on to what 20 guys did 250 years ago, when they didn't even know nothing about nothing before they did anything?
Yeah, well, Adam keeps crying over the Constitution and totally ignores the Declaration of Independence. If you'd ever bother to read another document, maybe you can only read one, or his reading skills are limited. He'll see that we're entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. He is correct that Roe was incorrectly decided. And the reason why they should not have allowed abortion at all, because it destroys life. And the thing is, it's a major consensus by biologists. If Fernando would ever get off his teetotaling torts and start looking at SSRN.com and read what biologists say, vast majority of them, I mean, overwhelming, human life begins at conception. Now, if Guidry doesn't like it, the hysterectomy is available. If Bill, you don't like it because you think it violates black and white deals in your mind, hysterectomy is available for both black women and white women. And if you don't like it, then you can get a vasectomy. But no, we don't want to put personal responsibility. We'd rather kill a innocent child. And then I've seen on TV, they go, she can't get an abortion. She's got to go all the way to Colorado. Who's going to pay for her expenses? She got to go to hysterectomy. And then we want to see that. Okay. Oh, and she's going to lose a day of work. I saw this on TV. It was sickening. She's going to lose a day of work because she's got to go kill a child. And I'm supposed to cry over that?
To this anymore.
No way.
Okay. All right, flag. Guidry, you're up.
This is ridiculous. I challenge it.
Yes, go ahead, Guidry.
Well, Nick, you're talking about life, liberty. You're talking about life and liberty, but whose life and liberty you're talking about? So we are forgetting a woman's right to life and liberty. You're talking about abortion or getting pregnant as it happens easy. People have really complicated lives. You have young people, you have life happens. It's not about not wanting to have kids. It's about not being ready to have a child at this point. Nick, what happens when the children are born in families that are not ready, not capable to maintain children? You are not going to provide for them. You're not going to pay for their bills. You're not going to put them to school. They are going to be completely different level, different grade of the people. Abortion has been happening and it will be happening. I'm sorry, Nick, to break it up to you, but it happens to every single body, to normal people, and we have to deal with it. We cannot just put ourselves in a box and pretend that we live in a perfect la-la land where people can just choose to have a procedure that is permanent, not to have children. You know how many people had abortions last year in Texas? More than 54,000 women had abortions in Texas last year. It's approximately 12% of its population. I want to open eyes to you that it's happening and it will happen, and we have to deal with it. And also, when you talk about this situation, you completely don't see women, and you don't see that it's really a big part of our fabric and of our lives. And men also play a role in that.
Bill, can I say something?
No. Adam, I'm going to come back to you, but Fernando, but I want to come to you, Fernando, specifically only because of this. I recall in one of our discussions some time ago, but rather recent, when you were talking about, and you had raised a very sharp point, an incisive point that I thought, and that was that everybody's concerned about whether or not, they shouldn't have the right to abort the kids. But you raised the point, what's the cost when society forces them to have kids? And you said, I think you had made the point that says that everybody's concerned about the children being born, but then nobody cares about the children once they are born. Fernando, do you recall that? And can you remind me of that argument? Because it seems to me that we ought to be considering that as well when we look at this issue. Fernando?
I do remember that point, and it's exactly, and you are correct. What I state is that everybody is pro-life. What they are is pro-birth. And what they want is everyone to have kids. Then once the kid is born, it becomes, oh, I don't want to pay for welfare. I don't want to pay for food stamps. I don't want to pay for the projects and private housing in Section 8. Oh, that kid's running around stealing? Screw him. He deserves to be in jail. Well, that's a product of you forcing individuals to have kids when they don't want them, because then they neglect them, they abuse them, they beat them, they throw them in the street, become street urchins. But that part of the argument is completely forgotten. Nick has this complete and utter nonsense about vasectomies and hysterectomy. I guarantee you, if right now they passed a law that said every guy had to have a vasectomy until he was ready to have a kid, we wouldn't be discussing this issue at all. Abortions would be free and plentiful throughout the land because the things are reversible. So let's make it every guy has to get a vasectomy. I guarantee you everybody will be in an uproar. And by the way, to the nincompoop who's watching the show, always remember the following: those who can't do, those who can't teach. Hence, that's why I don't have time to waste writing books that you can't even read or understand.
You had another bad day today, didn't you, Fernando?
Okay, all right. Okay.
Outburst. Can I say something?
Well, no, Adam, please. Because I promise I'm coming to you, but I got to come to you, Jeff, first. Because, Jeff, I really want to make sure that you're part of this. And, Jeff, this is my specific question to you. So far, what we've heard is, at least on one side, we've got Guidry and Fernando, and I would certainly be in this camp as well, talking about the practical effects of Roe v. Wade and the policy matter of pro-choice, that is, an affirmative duty for pro-choice. Now, and those are specific impact kinds of questions. Now, Nick is talking about that as well as in terms of impact, but his solution is more draconian. But how do we square that, Jeff? And in the mind of an originalist, how do we get to a practical solution that works for our society, say, for example, within the mind of an originalist? Because right now on the Supreme Court, we've got, at least 4 originalists thinking about this issue. Jeff, and then I'm coming to you, Adam. Jeff?
Well, let me clear up one thing. If Roe versus Wade was overturned, or if the decision was overruled by the Supreme Court, that doesn't necessarily mean abortion is now illegal throughout the land. What it would do is send the issue back to the state legislatures where it was before Roe. And so the legislature, you would make all of these policy arguments that Fernando and Guidry are making, you would make to the legislature, and the pro-life community would come in and make their arguments. And then the legislatures would have to balance the competing interests and decide what the people wanted and how they want to define when life begins and so on. But I think it is illustrative that all of the arguments Fernando and Guidry were making were not legal arguments. They were policy arguments. And if I can go beyond that to talk about the living Constitution just briefly.
Please.
Thomas Jefferson said, "Our greatest security is in the possession of a written Constitution. Let us not make it a blank paper by construction." Construction meaning interpretation. So what I'm telling our audience is, if our Constitution evolves and changes and grows, no one knows what direction that's going to go in, and you can't vote out the Supreme Court justices that decide this or that thing should be a right, or the government should be allowed to do this or that thing. If the Constitution can mean whatever we want it to mean in current society and unelected judges get to determine that, we don't have a democracy or a republic.
Okay, Adam, you have the floor, but this is the look. Here's a very specific question, Adam. I really have to narrow your vast and highly intellectual mind, at least according to our viewers. Some think that you walk on water. It seems to me, though, Adam, you did at one point advocate the position that it's not that Roe reached the wrong conclusion, but rather it was based on the wrong part of the Constitution, which is what Guidry was reminding us. First, isn't that true, Adam? Simple yes or no.
Yes.
Okay, fine. Now, Adam, with that having been said, what do you make of these policy arguments? Because it seems to me that you're probably going to fall in the camp with Jeff about throwing it back to the states. But these policy arguments cannot be overcome. The ones that Guidry make, the ones that Fernando make, the ones that I concur with, even to a lesser extent, the outrageous ones from Nick. I mean, talk about authoritarian. But Adam, what do you make of the policy arguments, whether it's the Supreme Court, federal level, or states? Adam?
Well, I want to be very clear. I agree with Fernando, and I particularly agree with Guidry regarding their arguments about abortion. I am pro-choice. However, their arguments are policy arguments, not legal or constitutional arguments. Those arguments should be made before the legislature and resolved through the democratic process. When you allow 9 unelected and life-tenured judges to make law up out of thin air when not a single word in the Constitution could possibly support the creation of that right, you compromise democracy, you compromise liberty, and you give power to people who are unaccountable. It's kind of like saying, imagine a law that says it shall be illegal to smoke a cigarette in a public park, and someone gets caught snorting cocaine. An originalist would say the person can't be convicted under the law because they weren't smoking a cigarette, and if the legislature wants to include cocaine, they can do it through the democratic process. A living constitutionalist would say the spirit of the law means any harmful substances, and they would make up the law. That's what the court did in Roe, and that's why it's wrong. But let me be clear. Guidry is right, and I agree with Fernando about their policy ideas, but they should be resolved democratically, not judicially.
Okay, Guidry, I'm coming to you because, see, we finally
got Nick, I got to tell you, Nick, your comment really, really does not reflect an understanding of what women go through when they have to make these difficult decisions. And I think that was really I agree with Guidry wholeheartedly on that.
My violence is out for them, the ones that made a choice not to get a hysterectomy. So the thing is, my violence are, what about the dead kid? Let's just ignore the dead kid. Okay, Adam? And let's ignore, by the way, which you do all the time, the Declaration of Independence. That's, I guess, not a document that you give any credence to whatsoever.
I want to throw a flag.
I have absolutely no response to that because none is needed.
Okay,
no, none is needed because the Declaration of Independence doesn't mean anything to you.
Okay, no, hang on, everybody. These are the rules. Jeff threw a flag. Jeff, what do you got?
Well, my second flag is this. Abortion isn't mentioned in the Declaration of Independence either.
Thank you.
It's life, Jeff.
Bye, Nick. Bye, Nick.
It's life.
Bye, Nick.
We're not looking at abortion. We're looking at life, Jeff.
Okay. Okay.
Go read the Declaration of Independence.
Okay,
Right to life. It says life, liberty, pursuit of happiness.
Nick,
Right
Jeff has the floor. Jeff, go ahead. You get one more comment, and then I'm coming to you.
And the Due Process Clause says that the government cannot deprive someone of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. But that's a separate issue from whether a doctor or the mother can deprive that unborn child of life, and whether that child has a protectable interest in life. And because the Constitution says nothing about it, the proper thing to have done back then would have been to vote. And allow the democratic process in the various states to resolve the issue. Now we're, 50 years removed from Roe versus Wade. What are we going to do now? I think it's a more open question as to what the Supreme Court is going to say.
Okay. Well, listen, just as a kind of observation, it's more of an open question now, at least for our audience, because of the appointees to the Supreme Court. That's the only reason, which is why, we're back in this matter. Otherwise, it'd be unknown. But, Guidry, I want to ask you this point, and it's kind of the inverse of what Adam was raising. Adam was suggesting in his argument that fundamentally for his position, which is the foundation, I think, of his position intellectually, is that you can't have these unelected people create out of the ether these rights. But legally, we have the 10th Amendment, which says any rights not expressly given to the federal government are reserved specifically for the states, and it leaves it wide open. So, Guidry, my question is, if we put Adam's argument on its head, do these non-elected officials have the right to take from us that which has never been defined in the Constitution and which presumably by the Constitution's silence is ours to begin with? Therefore, they can't remove it. So the argument would be essentially this. It's not in the Constitution. Therefore, the Supreme Court can't rule on it, and it's my right inherently, as in one of those rights given to us divinely by God, as is contained in the Declaration of Independence. Guidry, how does that argument strike you? And Fernando, I'm coming to you after that. Guidry?
Well, there are a few rights that are not included in Constitution: the same-sex marriage, right to contraception,
I know, well,
multiracial
aren't
marriage,
those all our rights?
all of these rights were.
Yeah, but aren't those all our rights?
You see, Bill. Yes, but at the same time, there are more essential rights, such as right to reproduction. That is, by mere definition, right to freedom and liberty, and to your own
In
body,
your
to a woman.
subjective policy view.
And right now, no, but really, Adam, look what happened. So you support the SB 8 law that Texas state just enacted. You know that at least 9
don't
other
support it.
states are now in preparation of similar laws. So that's what, so your argument is basically, let's take the risk. Let's have the end result as we had in Texas. In a foreseeable future, for approximately a year or more, all women in Texas will not have a right to abortion. And let's see what happens. Let's give the states right to figure it out and play with women's bodies, destinies, and really exposing them to suffering. In my opinion, again, reproductive right is essential right, and it should be granted with Constitution, such as several rights that were not specifically named in the Constitution, such as right to contraception or same-sex marriage, and we should maintain it, because states, we can see that abortion, we have to maintain, we have to understand the reasoning that abortion is probably the most raw political issue. The appointment of the judges was primarily centered as how they're going to
But
rule and
Guidry, you're
what's
presenting
pertinent
two
about
options.
abortions. The history demonstrates
hang on.
that we cannot
presenting
separate.
two options.
But we cannot separate.
Yes, you are.
politics
You're
of
saying
abortion from the
simultaneously,
judicial process.
what you're
That's
saying, Guidry,
troubling.
I'm sorry, but what you're saying is this. Should we let the abortion issue be decided by the people democratically? Or should we allow 9 unelected judges to create the right to abortion, even though it exists nowhere in the Constitution, to create it out of thin air just because you think that should be the right policy?
Okay, all right.
Option one is
Can I throw
Democratic.
a red
Because-
flag on
It's
Adam?
because of
You're
precedent. Look
anti-democratic.
what's happening.
Can
Okay,
I throw a
sorry.
red flag on Adam with his Democratic garbage?
Okay,
Okay,
Nick,
the thing
well,
is-
Then that's why I ran, Nick.
Go
Okay.
ahead, Nick, briefly.
Okay, let me tell you how much garbage that is, Adam. This, oh, let's go elect to see whether somebody dies.
That's
I
what the
mean,
people should have the power.
no. The thing is, that's what Hitler did. He goes, well, we'll all get together and decide who's going to live and who's going to die. Come on, the democratic process breaks down when you destroy people's lives, and for some reason you don't seem to have a problem with that. You think people should all go. Let's get a vote together and see who we're going to kill tonight or not. That is not right. If you looked at our Declaration of Independence, it said we're entitled to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and that's what the Supreme Court made a wrong decision. They should have said no abortions. You don't like it. That's how our country operates. Go to another country. Have a good day.
Fernando. Okay, Fernando, and I'm coming to you. I want to see if you can make sense of it, but I have a slightly different question for you, Fernando, if you can, and that is, Guidry's talking about the 54 or 55,000, at least based on last year's women that exercise their right to choose. Now, I guess assuming that there's going to be some portion in the future and that we're not likely to deviate from that 50 or so thousand, if we can make that reasonable assumption, it's reasonable to assume that they're just going to go other places. Isn't all that the states of Mississippi and Texas doing as a practical matter is exporting the social cost of a woman's right to choose to other states, meaning it's not just because Texas says they won't do it. Those women will then have to travel. And so won't that produce a burden for states like New York and other states where they presumably still allow the procedure? Fernando, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. That's exactly what it's doing. And already seeing the fruits of the law, women have left. I forgot the number. Many have started to go to the neighboring states where it's allowed. And you would think that red states such as Texas and Mississippi, which suck up the most welfare dollars from the federal government, wouldn't have these types of laws. Because it is pro-birth, not pro-life. And Nick's bringing up the Declaration of Independence about life, liberty. It's life for those of us that can walk and breathe on our own, not when you're dependent on somebody else who is making all the decisions. Woman has a self-determination. I think that somewhere in the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, everybody keeps bringing up that the Constitution is silent about abortion. Well, the Constitution is also about marriage, yet we believe that's a right that all of us have, correct? But somehow nobody's saying about that. The Constitution is also silent about having a national bank, yet we have one. No one's complaining about that. So this argument that it's not found in the Constitution is complete and utter nonsense. Plenty of things that aren't in the Constitution. They aren't going to write every single thing. And the other argument that judges don't create law is further nonsense and shows that some of us just don't walk into court. Judges and lawyers are creating laws every single minute with decisions where they expand statutes, where they change them, where they strike them down. So to say that judges and lawyers don't create laws is complete and utter nonsense.
Okay.
I never said that. I said they're inventing law out of thin air.
Okay. All right. Well, rights, I think, Adam. You said they're inventing rights out of thin air, although you would find those same rights under a different provision of the Constitution, which I think you admitted to earlier. Jeff, I want to start with you because we are closing out our program here. But Jeff, I mean, what do you make of this, the conversation so far? I mean, you are a rigorous, intellectual, honest kind of attorney. I mean, one that really, you often examine your own thoughts, and they change as you listen to arguments. Has anything changed your opinion so far that you've heard today?
Well, no. I mean, Guidry and Fernando are both friends of mine. I like both of them very much, but their arguments are not legal arguments; they're policy arguments, and I don't agree with the premise that they bring to the table that the Supreme Court can start making up new constitutional provisions because it seems really important at the time. I think we have a written constitution that is to be stable, and that is the best bulwark or security of our rights. If we start allowing judges we have started allowing judges to make it up, we're less secure. The exigencies of the moment tend to govern what Hamilton called the ill humors of society.
Okay, all right. Guidry, because we're in that second lightning round because we are close to, landing. But I'm going to go Guidry, then I'm going to go Adam, then I'm going to go Fernando, and then I'll get to you. So Guidry, please.
No, I think abortion is included in Constitution as a substantive due process, right? It's right to liberty and freedom and life, and it has to be granted. We also have a stare decisis. We have a precedent of 50 years plus, and that's a legal argument that we should not deviate from that. Also, abortion is not 100% right. It is regulated based on viability of the fetus, and we don't know who can decide the viability of fetus. Is it a moral question, philosophical question, medical question, biological question, religious question? In my opinion, it is an individual and personal question, and it can and has to be resolved only within a woman because it's her body.
Okay, Adam, please.
Guidry's argument is akin to saying this: you still deserve an A on your final exam, even though you cheated on it. The Supreme Court cheated. They manipulated the Constitution. They completely disregarded a reasonable meaning of the text. They invented law out of thin air like a bunch of unelected oligarchs. To me, That's not democracy. That's wrong. Power belongs to the people. And while I agree with the policy arguments that Fernando and Guidry make, those arguments should be resolved through democracy, through the legislature. They want to give power to philosopher kings. I want to give power to the average person.
Okay, Fernando.
I agree with Guidry. This is a decision that is made by the individual woman because it affects no one but herself. Further, everybody keeps bringing up that they made up these rights out of thin air. I would like to find where in the Constitution it states separate but equal is available and it should be done. That sounds like that was out of thin air to justify justify racism at the time. Yeah, protection, and this is a substantive due process right. Nowhere in the Equal Protection Clause does it state that you can be separate but equal. That was made up out of thin air because they felt like it, right? But that one was okay. Now that you're infringing on a woman's right to do what she wants to do, now we have a problem. Let's make vasectomies
It's always
for all men until they're ready to have kids. Guaranteed, we'll have abortions across the land.
Okay.
Separate but equal was not okay. It's an argument against what Fernando is arguing for.
Exactly.
Okay.
It was wrong, and I agree with Jeff.
Okay, well, fine. I just want to say this. I'm sorry, Fernando, for some reason, we've just lost him. But Nick, before I hand it over to you, I just kind of want to make two observations. Oh, there we have. I think we have Fernando back. Fantastic. One, on behalf of the lawyers and your colleagues, I really want to thank Guidry and Fernando for the best backdrops. Guidry, you've had a number of photo bombers. They really stopped to listen to you. I think one gentleman wanted to join the conversation, which I think is a testament to your magnetism and your arguments. And so for that, I think it's great. And even some of the arguments that I think while Fernando was talking caused some of the people behind you to pause and listen. So for that, I want to thank Fernando, who in solitude with his new background came in with some of the sharpest arguments. So Fernando gets an attaboy and Guidry gets an attagirl. Now, Nick, it seems to me, as my observation on all of this, at the end of the day, didn't we make up this nation, Nick? I mean, didn't a bunch of people who could have been had they lost the war, they would have been hung for treason. So they were a bunch of criminals anyway. They made up everything here in the United States, and don't we have the right to do today exactly what they did then? And Nick, so isn't this really a whole lot about nothing? Nick, and then land the plane, please.
Lawyers, follow the science. That's all I can say. Instead of follow the law, follow the science, and we'll all be okay. In the meantime, we're going to end this Lawyer's Den, and we'll see you tomorrow. Another very exciting edition of Lawyer's Den. And Guidry goes, let's go look at something that took place 40 years ago. Who cares? Okay, that's